Okay, in this part, we're going to actually look at different views of the how of creation. And for some, it's going to include some ideas of evolution, but not for all of them. So we're going to categorize these different views that we're going to look at in as old Earth theories, and some are going to be young Earth theories. The trick that we have to come to terms with, and this is pretty much a fact, the Earth looks like it's old. It gives all kinds of evidence of being very old. The question is whether it is old or not. It can't be old for young Earth theories. It can just look that way, or it might be. So the fact of the matter is that Earth looks old. The question is how old actually is the Earth? And that's going to be a pressing theme for us as we look at these different theories together. So the first of the old Earth theories that we're going to look at is what we will call theistic evolution. This has to be separated from kind of secular atheistic evolution, because for this to be anywhere within the Christian idea at all, God has to be the one who was at work in the process. So God created, these folks will say, but God chose to use evolution to create the universe and life within that universe. So God still made it. It's not like it was just by accident, like atheistic evolution would say. God did it. He simply chose to use evolution as the mechanism of the way he created. He may have directed every step of evolution, so that he was involved in making sure that each time there was a mutation to a new species, that was God's involvement. That's one way to go. Others would say he intervened only when needed. So for the most part, the process went along the way it was supposed to. But when he wanted to create, maybe let's say humans, for example, he was particularly involved then, or another species. There were moments at which God was more involved, or involved to a greater percent. He also could have simply kickstarted the process, that he got the ball rolling and set within the mechanism of the universe itself. The universe had a DNA that life was going to come forth because he created it to have that DNA. Still, the issue is God created. But here we're going to argue that he used this evolutionary process. So to create, God used natural processes like a Big Bang, natural selection, and mutations that occur over extremely long periods of time. That should be and not a on that slide. So when we think of evolution, we have to be aware of two different types of evolution. The one here listed first is macroevolution. When you think of macroevolution, you should just understand the word change. So macroevolution, small change, is undeniable. One of my favorite places to go visit and lurk around is Gettysburg. I've always had a fascination. I'm a little bit of a history buff. There's a place there called the Jenny Wade House. She was the only civilian killed in the Battle of Gettysburg. If you go in there and do a tour, you'll find that the doorways are about 5 feet tall, maybe a little taller, but not much. Ours are normally about 7 feet tall now. So from the 1800s to the 2000s, the 2000s, I was going to say, we have changed. Whether our diet is different, or we're being influenced by hormones that we're giving cows to make more milk, or that, whatever it is, we are generally taller than people were in the 1860s. We are living longer. Part of that's because of technology, some things like that. But all of these kind of things, these are changes that are occurring. And so change itself is undeniable. Within 100 years, we can see change in the species of humans just within the same country. Microevolution is, I would argue, undeniable. Macroevolution is usually what we are thinking of when we think of evolution. That's the movement from one species to another species. And in my strong opinion, evolution as it's currently thought of, which we usually mean macroevolution, that can always only ever be a theory. Why? Because in order for something to be a fact, it has to be, you have to have a thesis that's proved, and we have no evidence of one species becoming another species. It is lacking. And so it might truly be that all of the evidence is pointing in that direction. I'm not making that argument, but evolution as we think of it can always only be a theory. It might be our best theory, it might be our best explanation, but it's always only a theory because we can't duplicate this in the lab. We can't see how this goes. So we want to make sure that we're clear on the difference between microevolution, which is just change, and then macroevolution, which is from essentially a one-celled organism to a complex human being, given enough time and enough change that occurs over time. Okay, so the first one was theistic evolution. God did it, but he used evolutionary process. The next one that we want to talk about is called the day-age theory. And this view says that in Genesis, when we have God creating in 6 days, it's talking about 6 time periods. It's not trying to say 6 24-hour periods. And one of the interesting, here we would say that creation was a very long process. This for these folks, like theistic evolution, the age of the world is not a problem. The days described in Genesis should be thought of as periods of time, perhaps even billions of years in length for each of them. This day-age theory is also sometimes known as old Earth creation or progressive creation. What was I going to say about this? One of the interesting aspects of this, and I'm not arguing that this is the case, if you look at the order of creation provided in Genesis, and if day-age is the way it goes, the order of things, the way they occur in Genesis does seem to be the pattern by which we think evolution occurred. So you have water, you have things in the water, things out of the water. The order of things in the Genesis account, if you blow out that timetable from a week long to billions of years long, all of a sudden you are looking like evolution at that point. So there is some variety within these camps, but they all agree that God created everything directly and supernaturally, but he did it over vast ages. So whereas theistic evolutionary folks would have the sense that God could have put in the DNA of the universe the mechanisms to bring forth life, here these folks are very much more hands-on for God. Everything that was created, God created. He just chose to do it over a very long period of time. The problem with this idea, and actually also with theistic evolution, actually, as I think about it, probably the problem with all old Earth theories, is the Bible seems to talk about death as much a theological problem as it is a biological problem. And we will unpack that more when we get to eschatology in the last week. But for the Bible, for the faith, death is a theological problem as much as a biological problem. Well, if death enters the world because of human sin, you have to have millions, if not billions, of years of things dying in order to get to where we are with human beings on the face of the earth. And how do you understand, how does death fit into these old Earth views if it's a theological problem, if it enters the world as a result of human sin? That's an issue for this one and the other one. It's going to be an issue for this one as well. but slightly less. So this is called the gap theory, still an old Earth theory. So we read Genesis 1:2 and 1:3. I don't know if I have those. No, I don't. Okay, I thought I had the actual verses here. But if you read Genesis 1:2 and 1:3, in the beginning God created heaven and the earth. The earth was formless and void, darkness, however it goes, I don't remember. But after 1:2, before God actually starts to form things in 1:3, who knows how long did the Spirit hover over the face of the deep? These folks saying perhaps the age of creation exists because of this long period of time between 1:2 and 1:3. Again, it's an attempt to say we understand that the earth looks old. We're not sure that it is old, but here's an explanation. Maybe before God actually started an activity of creating earnestly, that there was this long period of time of formlessness and things like that.